There we go. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so once again, welcome to the session. My name is Andrew Hughes. Today, we're going to be talking about only the exciting ISO standards. The boring ones we're not going to talk about. Now, let me see if I can figure out. That's not the right one. Okay, I had a joke slide here. It was going to be hilarious. It was a picture of a standard, and I was going to say, we're going to review this line by line, and everyone would laugh, and it's 70 pages long, so we're not going to do that. So, as I mentioned, I got into the international standards world about 5 years ago, finding my way, and I thought I'd put up some reasons why I help build standards, especially in the identity management space. Standards bring order, and if you like order, working with or creating standards is a good thing to do. If you like setting the rules, standards are the rules that organizations and nations follow. They codify and propagate state-of-the-art so that not everyone has to learn how to do the next best thing. You can download the standard and follow it, and it's the state-of-the-art as discussed in the development group. And there's great satisfaction working internationally. Okay, so a little bit of an introduction to the International Organization for Standardization. As you saw with Kalia's maps, there are many standards organizations. ISO is one of them. Each one has a slightly different role in the ecosystem. They have different inputs and outputs and responsibilities. This quote is from ISO's page. ISO creates documents that can be used consistently to ensure that products and services are fit for purpose. Okay. Very important phrase, fit for purpose. Just a quick overview of the organization. It's the International Organization for Standardization. ISO is a made-up acronym. It's not actually an acronym. It means equal. And I didn't do that. There we go. Nope. There. It's been around for a while, since 1947. Very important that the members of ISO are the national standards bodies, and each country has one as a member. Everything's funneled through the national standards body. That is the member. Experts participate, and you can be an expert. In fact, you're already an expert in something. There's a place for you here. Significantly, there's a strategic partnership with the World Trade Organization, and we'll see that here, the value of the ISO standards. So, for those of you that are familiar with the World Trade Organization, they work on trade agreements and equalize the playing fields for nations to trade. Okay, I'll stop playing with this. So, when they started, one of the early agreements was this technical barriers to trade agreement. Basically, so that standards and other technical restrictions would not become barriers to trade. Meaning that if you follow a standard that they recognize, it cannot be used against you as a company to prevent you from trading in another country. It's not a technical barrier to trade. Okay? ISO is recognized as the source of these international standards. So that's one of the important things about ISO standards. Also, the ISO brand. Who's heard of ISO before now? Everyone puts up their hand or is thinking. You might recognize some of these standards. 27001 for information security might be the most widely known, 9001 as well. I can't remember if it's 23,000 or 33,000 standards in ISO. Fortunately, we don't have to deal with all of them. However, there's a lot of brand recognition and a lot of utility in ISO standards. These are 4 very, very large SaaS providers, and each of them has a compliance page, trust and compliance page, and they all are certified for several ISO standards, the ones you would expect. The one, ISO 27001, Information Security Management, the cloud provider one, and also the quality management one. Okay, if you remember nothing else from this presentation, memorize these letters. Okay, I'm kidding. And I'm also going backwards and forwards with this. There we go. That was the name, the acronym for a working group specifically for identity management and privacy standards. Someone's playing with the mouse on me. Study Group 17 is ITU, not ISO. Correct. Anyways, you can read the parts of the scopes that they have. So the SC27 working groups, there are 5 of them. The Information Security Management System standard comes out of working group 1. We're most interested in working group 5 for identity and privacy. A little small to read, if it stays on the page. This slide is, I've got links at the back of the presentation if you want to take a look at the scope of the work group. But basically it shows that identity management and privacy technologies are well embedded within the IT security frame. Okay, now the exciting stuff. This is exciting because it keeps going backwards. And because oh, there we go. Now I don't have to look back. Who's paying attention? Come on, laugh with me, laugh with me. Endless meetings. Fast is defined as 24 to 36 months, and there's lots and lots of documents. Of course not. It's the same list as the beginning. But if you like complex systems of systems, negotiating, parsing very carefully for maximum understandability and consumption, that last bullet point is the thing. It's an incredibly complex environment. All standards organizations like this, because everybody's got to understand what you mean outside of the room that you're creating it in, not just inside the room you're creating. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the projects. Okay, 32 standards projects. Now, what a standards project is, in ISO terminology, is a standard. So there's 32 active standards just in this one working group. Okay? 11 of them are identity management related, 14 are privacy technology related, and 7 are biometric related, all in the field of IT security. There's structure, there's stages of progress, all the way from, is this a good idea, should we standardize, is it time, to put it in the store, it's ready for download. Lots of links at the back again. If you have many hours and you're interested, you can look at many of these pages. So, promise you, I'll get to the interesting stuff soon. These are some of the significant things happening right now in WG5. They may not look all that interesting or significant, but there's this, we're at a very significant inflection point right now in WG5. We're preparing the work plan, the business plan, to revamp and reorganize the core identity assurance standards. You'll see numbers and names in there. They're just references to the actual projects we're working on. Okay. So entity authentication assurance, that's credential management and authentication. So all the processes and practices around credential management and authentication. Identity proofing. It was going to be an international standard until everyone had some issues. We were unable to reach consensus in it, so we made it a technical specification. Now we have to work on, should it become an international standard, and how can we form consensus to come to an agreed text? If you're familiar with NIST 863, digital identity standards, or any of the frameworks based on this, you'll know that risk assessment is the first thing you do when designing a federated system or identity management system. There's no text that says how you should go about figuring out what identity risk is. So we're starting that document that prefixes all of the other risk-based assurance standards for identity, and terminology issues and conceptual issues between the published international standard framework for identity management, that's management of identity systems, and the assurance standards, which are more the operational side of identity systems. So what's changing? Well, in the Credential Management and Authentication Standard, the framework, we are aligning it with national level standards. Okay? NIST in the US, 863.3 as I mentioned. The UK's IDAP, which is similar but not the same. And Canada has identity management standards. So those are coming in. So that there can be a cross-mapping and equivalency between the international scope and the national scopes. Who knows what a level of assurance is with respect to identity? They're going away. Level of assurance is moved into the appendix as an example. So if you've bashed your head on levels of assurance, you will remember that they are a way for a federation with formal agreements to agree on levels of risk and boundaries between those levels of risk. Problem is, if you go to a different federation, the boundaries are slightly different, so they're not actually compatible. It's a big problem. So, in this round of refinement, the controls and the techniques are in the body of the document. So how do you do multi-factor hard token-based credential authentication? That's in the main body. Where does that fit into your localized version of level of assurance? That's an example in the appendix. And that's, uh-oh. Maybe it's when I wave this around. There we are. Or someone's telling me to hurry up. I don't know what time it is. Okay, I'll talk faster then. Just kidding. So we're also making some very much more clear delineation between the different phases in authentication and credential management. Very much solidifying that 29115, the Entity Authentication Assurance Framework, is about credentials and credential authentication. It's not about identity proofing. It's not about binding of the individual to the credentials. It is it's credentials. In parallel, if you notice from a previous slide, ISO and ITUT. So ITUT is a UN-sponsored organization dealing with information and communication technology standards, ICT standards. They are updating their version of 29115, entity authentication, at the same time. So a simultaneous update. There will be parallels. They won't be exactly the same. The users of the standards from different standards bodies have different scopes, different responsibilities. So it's important to have mapping and equivalence between the standards bodies for the critical standards like this one. As I mentioned before, we're writing down how you should consider identity risk and identity management risk, putting that as a separate standard in front of the other two. And the one that I'm most interested in, and if you have a couple days, I'd love to talk to you about it. Identity proofing and verification, the last unsolved problem in the digital identity space in IT systems. I have to put that last part in. Who is the actual person, and what if you don't actually care what their name is? Can they still be identified? And if so, how would you do that? It's not really covered in standards. That's the area that I'm specializing in right now. Okay, so project listing. Okay. There's going to be a test before you get your drink tickets tonight. No, there's not. So, biometrics-related projects, if you're scanning or taking pictures or downloading later, the key thing to remember about this is if there's letters in front of the number, that means we're actively working on it. It's in revision, it's about to be published, whatever. If there's no letters in front, that means it's published for the public to download, purchase from the stores. NP is new project, as you might imagine. These are the privacy technology related projects. The critical ones here, 29100, privacy framework that's freely available. That's terms, definitions, and concepts. Another one that I'm very interested in is down at the bottom, CD 29184, guidelines for online privacy notices and consent. So if you're a web property and you want to collect user consent to collect and process their data, that's what that one's for, is how do you do it? How should you do it? And identity management related projects, full list. 27551, AWI 27551. That's where the zero knowledge proofs are, in case you didn't recognize it. Did I mention that we have to translate, so the people working in the room on ISO standards, the majority do not have English as their first language, but all the work must be done in English. Then, when they take the standards home through the national bodies, they have to translate them. So the words we use have to be understandable. That's 3/4 of the challenge. Study periods are we're developing the scope and rationale for new standards projects. Just like every other standards body, we look at the market, try to figure out what's coming next, and decide if we're going to do work on a new standard or not in that area. And the study period is how we collect the information we need to provide a business case to spend the hundreds of hours of work from experts around the world to develop the text. Did I mention this exciting? Who's excited? But you guys already work in standards. I don't know if I've succeeded or failed. That's all I have. I'll try. Which one? Okay. We have proof, we will have proof on Twitter that standards development is exciting. Mike, you have a question?
I was going to agree with you on the previous slide. Your last point about negotiating consensus among experts in the field is complex. It's also rewarding. It's what makes this job really cool.
So, Mike Jones at the front here, in case you didn't hear his comment. He is one of the standards experts working at Microsoft. Mike works more on protocol and technical standards, as opposed to the ones I work on, which are more practices and policy standards. He's confirmed that the last bullet is true. It's incredibly rewarding. And if you think what you're working on is complex, try discussing it with people that don't speak your language. Any other questions? Pam.
Look, I even get the mic. I'm special. Somebody mentioned to me that one of the unusual things about ISO is that it's bound to law in certain places. Is that correct? Can you talk a bit about that or debunk it?
One of the interesting things about ISO is that because national bodies are the members, or national standards associations of bodies are the members of ISO, on occasion, national laws reference ISO standards directly. So for example, the EIDAS regulation in Europe specifically points at 29115, Entity Authentication Assurance Framework. It says, we highly recommend that you go look at this specific document produced at ISO. That is what we're expecting, and that's what they built their framework around. If you don't care about government, one of the other interesting things about ISO standards is that they're an incredibly easy way for buyers and procurement offices to dictate what standards to follow. So 27001, in certain areas of the world, if you want to sell anything, any IT system to government, Canada being one of these places, you must have implemented against 27001. It's table stakes. There is no other option. We'd love to see the identity management standards get to that same level. They'll get there. They have some maturing to do. But yeah, they're the basis of procurement. And if you have an internal authentication service for a large corporation, it does not hurt to ask them to implement against standards, because then everyone knows what to expect and what they're getting. Okay?
Any more questions?
John?
How does one get involved in standard building committees if they are not already part of such a group?
How do you get involved in standards? First of all, you think long and hard about what you're about to do. You remember this presentation, and if this was exciting, then keep going. For all standards organizations, you kind of just join. Some of them are free. Some of them you have to pay membership fees. Some you have to be accepted by a national body, which then makes you a delegate. I'm a delegate for the Canadian national body for ISO. Basically, if you're interested in the topic area or you need it to become standardized, you locate the body, and it'll have a how do you join and how do you pitch in. As I mentioned at the top, 5 years ago, I jumped in the deep end. So I've been doing this stuff, IT stuff, for 25 years. And I wanted to start writing the rules instead of following the rules. So I made a couple emails and found where to connect, and in we go. And if you want to, if you like learning new things and complex things, I dare you to learn how standards organizations actually work, because I'm still learning and I'll be learning until I'm done, which will be a long time. Okay, I think we're at time. So thank you, everyone.